I recently finished playing through the Legend of Zelda series, and I had plans to make a video about every game. What I liked, what I hated, how each succeeded, and how they impacted my life. As I've been playing through these games, life got busy. I had finals, I had work, relationship drama. It's been a rough 2 months. Now that I'm back to making videos, I don't really want to make the videos I had planned. They weren't really original. If you think about how I feel about X Zelda game video, it was kind of just like that. It wasn't inspired, it wasn't unique. So I decided I just played them, so there are some fresh takes in my mind. But instead of dick riding it, I think it'd be more interesting to talk about where I think the series falls short. Everyone could probably agree with what makes these games great, but what about where they fail? Although I love the game, Ocarina of Time might be the most overrated game of all time. It's consistently hailed as the greatest game of all time, and I just personally don't think that's the case. On the other hand though, I can't think of any game that could even come close to replacing it. But even now, as I'm nitpicking and trying to find things to discredit it, I can't really think of anything particularly damning. The story is kind of boring, but it has a few good parts. And Sheik being Zelda was a crazy plot twist that I didn't expect on my first playthrough. It's what I would have said if I hadn't played Brawl before I even knew what Zelda was. A lot of people rag on how the game controls or lack of camera control, but I actually don't think it's that big of a deal. And the camera's mostly cooperative. The only thing I can think of that really pisses me off is the 3DS port of this game. This shit is ass. The 3DS version of this game takes all the charm out of the original art style. Yeah, comparing them, the right looks good, I guess, but it looks gentrified. Especially Link. That does not look like Link. It looks like a dude wearing a Link Halloween mask, and that's not it either. When it comes to playing games, the walk cycles are very important to me. Usually you're looking at these walking animations the entire time you're playing the game. I don't know if everyone else feels the same, but I pay a lot of attention to these animations. I'm very particular about stuff like that. Examples of games that have good walking cycles and camera angles are games like the Resident Evil remakes, any game from Rockstar Games, and my favorite of all time, Ocarina of Time for the N64. Look at that stride. He's walking with purpose. With spunk, he's an adventurer. The 3DS version, he's such an oaf. Everything that Link does in the 3DS version just looks so awkward and I hate it. Look at the way he jumps, bro. Who jumps like that? Look at how he's swinging his arms. I fucking hate it. The 3DS version of the game is how I originally played it, but I was always envious. I like the way that Link looked better in the N64 version. Not only does Link himself have more charm, but the environment has more character. I'm not an art major and I don't know much about the fine details of art presentation, so I can't fully explain why, but the feeling is very visceral to me. Fuck the 3DS port. It is pretty much impossible to play this game without a walkthrough if you want to keep your playthrough under 100 hours. I'm exaggerating, but if you played this game, you should know what I mean. Majora's Mask takes place during a 3-day time loop in a land entirely separate from Hyrule. This land has a lot of quirks and is a living, breathing world that changes based on the time of day and what day it is in the 3-day cycle. There are things that you can do on day 1 that you can't do on day 3, and things that you can do on day 2 that can only be done on day 2. From what I understand, this is a big part of the reason why this game is so beloved and what makes it so dynamic. But for me, it's why I hate it. It takes so much time to orient yourself and do anything, because there are things that are only available on certain days that are necessary to beat the game, and they give you no guidance to do any of these tasks. Tattle, who I think is more annoying than Navi, tells you to do something, but there's really no guidance to get anything done. You just have to wander around and hope you talk to the right NPC, or hope they're available during the time that you need them. I shouldn't have to scour the wiki to keep my playthrough under a reasonable time. It also doesn't help that I just don't really like the game. I don't like the aesthetic. I don't like how it plays. It's crazy how games can be so similar but so different at the same time. I love Ocarina of Time, but I hate the game that uses the same assets. One thing I will say, the lore of Majora's Mask is some of the most engaging in the series. I just hate playing it, almost as much as I hate Wind Waker is my favorite Zelda game, and possibly my favorite game of all time. It swaps between this and Persona 5 depending on what day you ask me. I'm not even gonna say why, because I said no dick sucking. It wasn't even hard to pick out what I hate about it because I've hated it ever since the first time I played the game, and if you played Wind Waker, you probably know where I'm going with this. Usually in a Zelda game, You do the first couple of dungeons and that's basically when the tutorials are fully over. The game still holds your hand, but you get a little bit of freedom when it comes to how you handle yourself and what you do. The world opens up a lot more and you are rewarded with longer and more challenging dungeons. But in Wind Waker, they give you 2 dungeons, 3 if you count the final area, but I don't really. And that's all you get. What could easily be 2 or 3 more dungeons was replaced by a quest so monotonous, every time I get to this point in the game, I contemplate just ending my run. The Triforce quest has got to be the laziest shit I've ever seen from a game this good. The game is absolutely peak up to this point, and then they just throw this shit in there. In the Triforce quest, you're given a chart and you just go collect the Triforce pieces. Some of them being locked behind tedious and boring tests of strength. And let me tell you, combat is not one of this game's strong points, which exacerbates the shittiness of the combat challenges. I would rather have more dungeons. Instead I have to do a shitty scavenger hunt to get to the end of the game. It makes sense lore-wise, but it makes for a terrible gameplay experience. And gameplay comes first. Unless you're talking about gameplay doesn't come first in Twilight Princess. First of all, this game controls like garbage. It's hard to describe, but Link feels floaty and unresponsive at times. Maybe this was a quirk of the total real Wii U that I was playing it on, with my totally real Wii U Pro controller, but I doubt it because when I brought this up to my Zelda-loving coworker, he was like, yeah, Twilight Princess is his favorite game. This, coupled with the fact that the camera controls like ass, made walking around in this world dreadful, to say the least. Even the combat is clunky. When Link swings a sword, he looks good. And he's swinging it how I imagine a sword should actually be swung, but doesn't really make for accurate or enjoyable swordplay. So when I'm fighting anything that's not a boss or a mini boss, it just becomes a hassle, prompting me to avoid combat altogether. Since Twilight Princess is one of the most beloved Zelda games, that's gotta mean that the story is peak, right? The way that Twilight Princess opens up is really good. Like all the other Zelda games, Link is from a small town, and we see him wake up as he's summoned to do his daily duties. This Link out of all Links is the one that I can believe is strong like an actual hero. Ocarina of Time Link was just the greatest swordsman of all time with no training. In Wind Waker, he had a little training, but not nearly enough to make sense of half the shit he does in that game. In this game, it makes sense that Link is not just strong, but also a skilled swordsman. He's a farmhand that wrangles with goats, and there are dummies right outside his house, which means he's probably a little practiced with a sword. So when things get out of hand and he receives his call to action, things just flow naturally. His relationship with the kids serves as a good motivator, and one that is more believable than, I'm gonna save the world just because someone told me to. Watching as Hyrule gets plunged into darkness and seeing how it affects not just the familiar faces in the town, but the people at Hyrule Castle is really interesting, and the dialogue for even the most trivial NPCs is good. Link's relationship with Midna is the best out of all the companion characters in the series. Zant is creepy and a formidable adversary, and a breath of fresh air from the usual Ganondorf. The grand adventure and the threats looming over Link and Hyrule are all framed really well and executed amazingly, until the story just unravels itself in the final hour. It goes from a unique tale about the Twilight Realm to Ganondorf's revival story. The end of the game feels so abrupt, and Ganondorf's role in the story is meaningless. They could have left him out of the game. He shows up out of nowhere at the very end. He has no characterization, and then he dies just as quickly as he arrived. Zelda and Ganondorf have the same amount of screen time, which is none at all. The end of the game kind of puts a sour taste in my mouth when looking back at the story as a whole, because it seems like the writers had no idea where the story would even end up. They just had the cliff notes, and stringing it together obviously proved difficult. Maybe I'd be more inclined to forgive the lackluster writing at the end if the game didn't look so fucking ugly. I truly believe this game looks uglier than the N64 Zelda. The only 2 good-looking characters in this game are Zelda and Midna. Even Link is a little crungly looking. At least in Link looks good in this game, but that doesn't matter because I hate this game with a passion. I played this game a while back when I was first getting into Zelda, and I hated it. The dungeons are really good and imaginative in this game, and the music is stellar, so I just wrote it off as a good game ruined by motion controls. I finally got around to playing the Switch version of the game since I was told there was a motion control free way to play the game. I was sold, and I've been wanting to play this game since it released, and now that I have, I want my money back. Besides the positive things that I mentioned before, I hate everything about this game. I hate the way that it looks. I hate not the story itself, but how it's presented to me like I'm a brain-damaged 7-year-old. I hate fear. I hate the item system. I just hate this game. Just looking at it makes me angry. I take it back, Link doesn't look good. Fuck you. That's not even to mention, the motion control free way to play this game is actually worse than playing with motion controls. It's astonishing how they managed this. They chose the worst possible control scheme. Instead of utilizing the face buttons, bumpers, and triggers for different slashes, they use the right stick. The right fucking stick. This control scheme sucks so much dick. It's more cumbersome to use than the motion controls and pissed me off more. When I bought it, I thought this would open the path to me appreciating Skyward Sword and putting the hate aside, but all it did was make my hatred for the game burn ever so intensely. Fuck Skyward Sword. Breath of the Wild is the most acclaimed Zelda game to date. It has its fair share of flaws, but most of the widely recognized shortcomings of the game aren't necessarily a result of legitimate flaws, but mostly stemming from a desire for it to adhere to the same conventions as previous games in the series. People are also mad about weapons breaking, but I don't really understand why. I've heard so many different YouTubers talk about how it's a bad thing, but I still don't understand. I don't want my cool weapons to break. I don't know, get a new one. It's not that hard, but that's besides the point. When it comes to the Divine Beasts, they're boring. It's easy to compare them to the traditional Zelda games. Notice how they're considerably lacking in depth when compared to those, but even when comparing them to themselves, they're boring. After you've solved the first puzzle in the Divine Beast, all the other puzzles are just rehashes of the first original puzzle, if you can even call them puzzles. It's so simple I can't imagine anyone having any aha moments or even needing time to figure anything out. The Divine Beasts are just amalgamations of the worst shrine ideas thrown into a big animal, hoping the spectacle will distract you from how terrible they really are. But even the spectacle is short-lived because once you beat one Divine Beast, it ruins all the others because they sport the same interior. Which makes sense lore-wise because they were machines constructed by the same people for generally the same purpose. But you could easily come up with a lore reason to personalize each Divine Beast and make them interesting. The comparison to the other Zelda dungeons and puzzles and challenges is an unnecessary point to even bring up, because even within its own game it doesn't hold up. The world has so much to do and so much to offer, little puzzles at every turn and interesting things to hold your attention. But the main thing that's supposed to hold your attention, the main quest, is the most boring part of the game, even extending all the way to the final boss. Calamity Ganon looks so cool, and the concept of a halfway completed Ganon is fire as fuck. But the boss fight isn't challenging in any way, shape, or form, nor is it interesting. He rehashes the same moves from the Divine Beast bosses. Either you played all the Divine Beasts and came to Hyrule Castle, being punished or rewarded, depending on how you view it, with a shorter boss battle, or you're punished with redundancy, having to fight all the bosses right before the one that's similar to the rest. All this just gets even worse when Dark Beast Ganon shows up on screen. All of the awe and cool factor is immediately sucked out of the fight once you realize he won't attack you no matter what you do. There is no way to take damage in this boss without it being intentional, resulting in one of the most boring ways to end a game that I've played to date. Even though I like the story of Breath of the Wild in hindsight after the release of Tears of the Kingdom, majority of the main quest leaves much to be desired, like the additions made in Last year when I reviewed / glazed Tears of the Kingdom, I said it was the perfect sequel, and to that I still agree. The general gameplay loop is more refined, the new additions they add make the game more enjoyable compared to Breath of the Wild. The main quest, although lackluster in some areas, is a huge improvement on the fodder we got in Breath of the Wild. The story in this game was so amazing, it actually brought me to tears. I love this game. But this game took place in the same world, and with the amount of time and resources they had, I imagine there's a lot more they could have put into making the game stand out. I'm playing the game right now, and I really wish I could look into what they were doing during development. The world was already made and they had 5 years. Also taking into account that a lot of the Sky Islands are rehashes of each other, and the depths is just Hyrule inverted, what did they spend all of their time doing? 5 years is a lot of time to spend for the little that changed. And the world has changed, don't get me wrong, in some places pretty considerably. And I appreciate all the subtle changes too, given how extensively I played Breath of the Wild. But I just can't help but feel like more could have been done. This could very well be a case of Tears of the Kingdom living in Breath of the Wild's shadow, because despite this game being an improvement in every way, the first time I played Breath of the Wild was a far better experience than playing Tears of the Kingdom will ever be. I just can't help but feel that there was more that Tears of the Kingdom could have offered. Maybe I and many others are being too harsh on this one game, considering the state of gaming right now and how much dog shit gets shoved in our face by AAA studios. Tears of the Kingdom really does something special. But on the other hand, growth doesn't come from praise. It comes from criticism, which is why I like doing things like this. I like taking apart all things, whether I like them or not, because by noticing and picking out the shortcomings, it makes you appreciate what it achieved and did correctly. At least, that's how it feels for me. Maybe Breath of the Wild set the bar so high that regardless of the end product, we would have been disappointed either way. I did a lot of hating, but with the exception of Skyward Sword, I love all of these games. Even the ugly, deformed baby with the face only a mother could love, known as Twilight Princess. Make sure to leave a like and comment your thoughts, take it easy, and as usual, have a good one.